church choir vanished. During mountain retreat, 30 years later, construction workers break open a sealed well and find intact cassette recordings. Pine Ridge was the kind of town where everyone knew your business before you did. A mountain community of just under 5,000 souls. It wore its simple values proudly: faith, family, and the kind of neighborly bonds that had all but disappeared from bigger cities. The heart of this close-knit community was undoubtedly the Pine Ridge United Methodist Church, whose pristine white steeple had been pointing heavenward for over a century. And within that church, no group commanded more respect than the 23 members of the renowned Pine Ridge Harmony Choir, led by the passionate and somewhat eccentric director Thomas Whitfield. Thomas had transformed what had once been a modest Sunday service ensemble into a regional treasure. Under his direction, the choir had won multiple state competitions, their harmonies so pure that visitors would drive hours just to hear them perform on Sundays. The core of the group consisted of lifelong members: Martha Donovan, whose soprano could bring tears to the sternest eyes; the Sanderson twins, Ellen and Elizabeth, whose alto harmonies were so perfectly matched that people swore they shared one soul; old Frank Peterson, whose bass notes seemed to rumble from the very depths of the earth itself; and Rebecca Chen, a music teacher whose technical perfection balanced Thomas's more spiritual approach to music. "There's something divine in perfect harmony," Thomas often told them during rehearsals in the church basement. "When we truly align our voices, we create vibrations that connect to something beyond this world." Most choir members nodded along politely at these philosophical tangents, but they couldn't deny the almost transcendent feeling they experienced when hitting those perfect harmonies, a weightless sensation like their bodies were temporarily untethered from the physical world. The annual choir retreat to Whispering Pines Lodge was a tradition going back 15 years. Nestled high in the mountains, 3 hours from town, the remote lodge offered the perfect acoustics and isolation for intensive rehearsals. For 5 days each June, they would practice new arrangements, bond over campfires, and prepare for the coming year. This year's retreat held special significance. They would be premiering Thomas's original composition, Celestial Frequencies, at the regional Sacred Music Festival in the fall. This piece is unlike anything we've done before, Thomas explained during their final rehearsal before the retreat, distributing folders containing the complex sheet music. "I've been researching ancient musical theories, Pythagorean harmonics, Gregorian resonances, even some Eastern throat-singing techniques. This composition is designed to create specific vibrational frequencies that early religious scholars believed could open doors." Rebecca frowned as she studied the unusual notations. "These time signatures are unconventional, Thomas, and these note combinations, they create dissonance that resolves in ways I've never seen." Thomas smiled cryptically. "Trust me, when performed correctly in the right acoustic environment, you'll understand. I've been testing segments in different locations around the mountains. There's a stone well at the lodge that has the perfect resonance chamber for part of this piece." The week before the retreat, unusual weather patterns swept through the region. Barometric pressure fluctuated wildly, causing earaches and migraines throughout town. Electrical disruptions triggered car alarms and security systems. Local park ranger Dale Hoffman mentioned to the choir that several hikers had reported strange acoustic phenomena in the mountains, echoes that lasted too long, sounds that seemed to come from impossible directions. "Might want to reschedule that retreat," he suggested when he encountered Thomas loading sheet music into his van. "Something odd happening up there. Animals behaving strangely, compasses malfunctioning, probably just a weather system, but still." Thomas dismissed the concerns with a wave. "The mountains have always had their mysteries, Dale. That's what makes them perfect for what we're doing." The morning of their departure, June 12, 1992, dawned with unusual clarity. The 23 choir members gathered in the church parking lot, loading suitcases into a caravan of 5 vehicles. Family members waved goodbye, never suspecting it would be the last time they'd see their loved ones. Thomas's younger sister, Sarah, snapped a group photo before they left, capturing their excited faces, framed against the mountain backdrop. The first 2 days of the retreat proceeded normally, according to the single call Thomas made to Pastor Reynolds back in Pine Ridge. They were settling in well, the acoustics were exceptional, and the new composition was coming together beautifully. That evening, the choir sent a group photo to their families back home, all 23 members standing in front of the rustic lodge, holding their sheet music, faces flushed with the exhilaration of musical discovery. In the background of the photo, barely noticeable, was an old stone well with a wooden cover. On the morning of the third day, June 15th, Thomas announced they would be trying something special, according to the retreat schedule found. Later, they planned to rehearse the most complex section of celestial frequencies at the stone well Thomas had mentioned. The well, dating back to the original settlement of the area in the 1850s, was located in a small clearing about 300 yards from the main lodge. At approximately 9:15 a.m., the entire choir, carrying their sheet music and a portable recording device, walked to the well site. None of them were ever seen alive again. It wasn't until they missed their scheduled evening call to Pastor Reynolds that anyone realized something might be wrong. The pastor initially assumed they had poor reception or were too immersed in their rehearsals. But after 24 hours of silence, he called the county sheriff, who dispatched deputies to the remote lodge. What the deputies found defied explanation. The choir members' cabins were undisturbed, beds made, suitcases neatly packed as if no one had slept there the previous night. Personal items including wallets, purses and car keys remained in their rooms. All 5 vehicles sat in the parking area with no signs of trouble. Breakfast dishes from that morning were still in the sink, some with food, remains not yet hardened, evidence of a meal interrupted. The only sign of disturbance was at the stone well. The wooden cover had been removed and placed carefully beside it. Around the well's circumference, pages from Thomas's composition were found scattered in a perfect circle, each page torn precisely along the spine. The portable recording device was missing. Strangest of all, a fine layer of crystalline residue covered the interior of the well, a substance that later analysis couldn't identify. It would change molecular structure whenever scientists attempted to examine it under laboratory conditions. Sheriff Malcolm Kent organized the largest search operation in county history. For 3 weeks, search teams combed every inch of the surrounding forest. Helicopters with thermal imaging swept the mountainside. Rescue dogs tracked scents to the well, but then became disoriented, walking in precise circles before lying down, and refusing to continue. Not a single footprint led away from the well site. 23 people had simply vanished into thin air. It's as if they stepped off the face of the earth, Sheriff Kent told reporters at a press conference 3 weeks into the investigation. We've found no evidence of violence, no signs of wildlife involvement, no indication they planned to leave. Those people were here, and then they weren't. Theories multiplied like wildfire. Some locals whispered about alien abduction, pointing to the unusual weather patterns that had preceded the disappearance. Others suggested a mass suicide pact, though no evidence supported this, and all who knew the choir members dismissed it immediately. A few believed they had encountered a cult in the woods and been forcibly taken. The most persistent theory was that they had somehow fallen into the well, though professional cave divers found it extended only 40 feet down to solid rock with no connecting tunnels or caverns. For the families left behind, the absence of bodies denied them even the closure of proper funerals. The church held a memorial service 2 months after the disappearance, with 23 empty chairs arranged in choir formation at the front of the sanctuary. Pastor Reynolds tried to offer comfort. We may not understand God's plan in taking our beloved choir from us, but we must trust in his wisdom. Sarah Whitfield, Thomas's sister, refused to accept any explanation that assumed death. My brother was working on something revolutionary, she insisted when others suggested moving. toward acceptance. He told me his composition was designed to access frequencies beyond normal hearing, what he called the music between worlds. I think they found what they were looking for, and I don't believe they're dead. While others gradually returned to some semblance of normal life, Sarah dedicated herself to understanding her brother's research. She collected his notes from his apartment, studied the partial copies of celestial frequencies he had left behind, and interviewed choir members' families about any unusual comments or behaviors in the weeks before the retreat. She discovered Thomas had been making weekly trips to the mountains for months before the retreat, often returning with recordings and cryptic journal entries about resonance points and vibrational thresholds. The investigation officially went cold after 1 year. The families filed death certificates. The church eventually formed a new choir, though no one would use the original sheet music folders with the missing members' names embossed on them. Whispering Pines Lodge closed permanently, the owners unable to rent cabins after the notorious disappearance. Life in Pine Ridge settled into a new normal, with the choir incident becoming the kind of local legend that residents discussed in hushed tones. Only Sarah maintained her vigil. On the anniversary of the disappearance each year, she would hike to the well, now surrounded by overgrown forest as nature reclaimed the abandoned lodge grounds. She would sit beside it for hours, sometimes singing portions of her brother's composition, hoping for some sign. Occasionally, she thought she heard faint harmonies rising from the depths, voices intertwining in impossible patterns, but could never record anything conclusive. 10 years passed, 20. The stone well became weathered, partially covered by vines and moss. Few people in Pine Ridge spoke of the choir anymore. Many of the older residents who remembered them had passed away. The younger generation knew it only as a creepy story told around campfires. Sarah, now in her 60s with grey streaking her, once dark hair, had never married, her life consumed by her brother's disappearance. Then came the development project. In 2022, 30 years after the choir vanished, a luxury resort company purchased the entire mountain property, including the ruins of Whispering Pines Lodge. Their plans included demolishing the old structures and building a modern retreat center, with spa facilities and hiking trails. Construction began in early spring, with crews clearing overgrowth and mapping the terrain. On May 28, 2022, a team of workers was assessing the old well for removal when they made a discovery that would reopen wounds long scarred over. As they prepared to dismantle the stone structure, one worker noticed something unusual. The interior of the well had been sealed with concrete at some point, with the seal so weathered and moss-covered that previous visitors had missed it. When they broke through the concrete cap, they expected to find the natural well shaft extending down to the water table. Instead, they found a perfectly preserved circular chamber. The walls were lined with what appeared to be choir robes, 23 of them, arranged in a standing formation as if still occupied by invisible bodies. In the center sat the missing portable recording device, an old Sony cassette recorder, surrounded by a perfect circle of small riverstones. Most inexplicably, the device's power light was on, the batteries somehow still functioning after 3 decades. When Sheriff Teresa Liu, who had been a deputy during the original investigation, arrived on the scene, she immediately quarantined the area and contacted Sarah Whitfield. "I think you need to see this," was all she said over the phone. Sarah arrived to find a scene straight from her recurring nightmares. The choir robes, the same navy blue with gold piping she remembered from countless Sunday services, hung in the exact formation the choir would stand during performances. Sopranos and altos in front, tenors and basses in the back, with a space in the center where Thomas would stand to direct. Each robe had a name tag still pinned to it. Each was in pristine condition, showing no signs of decay despite 30 years in a sealed well. "It's impossible," Sheriff Liu whispered as they stared into the chamber. "These should have deteriorated long ago. And how is that recorder still?" "Powered." With trembling hands, Sarah reached for the cassette recorder, pressing the rewind button. To everyone's shock, it functioned perfectly, the tape spinning backward with a mechanical whir. When she pressed play, the well chamber filled with the sound of her brother's voice, as clear as if he were standing beside them. This is Thomas. Whitfield Pine Ridge Harmony Choir, June 15, 1992, were at the resonance point I identified during my preliminary research. The stone configuration of this well creates the perfect acoustic environment for the frequency modulations in celestial frequencies. We're about to attempt a complete performance. Sarah and the sheriff listened in stunned silence as Thomas directed the choir through warm-up exercises. His instructions were punctuated by the shuffling of sheet music and occasional coughs or whispered comments from choir members. Then came the performance itself, a composition unlike anything Sarah had ever heard, with harmonies that seemed to bend the very air around them. The music created patterns that weren't simply heard, but physically felt, vibrations that caused the stone walls to resonate and the air to shimmer visibly. As the piece progressed, the choir's voices became increasingly synchronized, moving beyond perfect harmony into something that sounded mathematically precise, as if they were accessing some fundamental frequency of reality itself. In the recording, Thomas could be heard encouraging them. "Yes, that's it. Feel the resonance point approaching. Stay in formation." The most chilling moment came near the end of the recording. As the harmonies reached an almost unbearable intensity, choir member Martha Donovan's voice could be heard breaking formation. "Thomas, the air is... I can see through it. What's happening?" Thomas's reply sent shivers down Sarah's spine. "Stay in formation. We're breaking through. The frequencies are aligning just as the calculations predicted. Keep singing." What followed was impossible to describe adequately. A cacophony of voices expressing wonder and fear simultaneously, the sounds of rushing wind, and then a series of tones so precisely aligned that listening to them caused physical discomfort. Several notes seemed to extend beyond the range of human hearing, becoming more felt than heard. Then abruptly, silence. Not the silence of a recording ending, but a total absence of sound that lasted for exactly 17 seconds. The final words on the tape came from Thomas. "We've found it. The doorway is stabilizing. Everyone link hands. Remember, we need to maintain the harmonic structure as we cross. Once we're through, I'll seal the entry point. Sarah, if you're hearing this, we're not gone. We've simply moved to where the music was always trying to take us. The frequencies exist on both sides. Listen carefully, and you might still hear us singing." The recording ended with the sound of stone scraping against stone, then silence. Forensic analysis of the well chamber revealed further impossibilities. The concrete seal had been poured from the inside, with no evidence of how the person who poured it could have exited afterward. Chemical dating confirmed it had been sealed in 1992, within days of the choir's disappearance. Most disturbing were the handprints found preserved in the concrete, 23 distinct sets, pressed as if in benediction, creating a perfect circle around the well's circumference. The discovery led to a reopening of the investigation, with experts from various fields attempting to make sense of the evidence. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit suggested a complex shared delusion, resulting in group suicide, but could offer no explanation for the recorder's power source, the preservation of the robes, or how the well had been sealed from inside. Acoustic. Engineers who analyzed the recording identified frequencies that shouldn't have been possible to create with human voices alone. Vibrations that existed at the edge of known physics. For Sarah, the discovery brought both vindication and deeper mystery. Her brother's notes, which she had studied for decades, suddenly made alarming sense. Thomas had been researching theoretical physics alongside ancient musical traditions, particularly focusing on quantum resonance theories and something he called dimensional harmonics. His notes contained complex equations connecting specific sound frequencies to molecular vibration patterns that could theoretically weaken the boundaries between different states of matter, or, as he put it in one margin, note, between different layers of reality. The most significant breakthrough came 6 months after the well discovery. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a quantum physicist who had taken interest in the case, found a pattern in Thomas's equations that corresponded to a newly discovered quantum phenomenon, harmonic resonance states that could theoretically allow matter to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. When she fed the frequencies from the choir's recording into her laboratory equipment, the results were unprecedented. The vocal harmonies in this recording create standing wave patterns that exactly match what we would expect to see in a theoretical dimensional boundary event, she explained to Sarah and Sheriff Liu. Put simply, if multiple dimensions do exist alongside our own, this specific harmonic pattern would be the mathematical key to accessing them. Further investigation of Thomas's apartment, which Sarah had maintained exactly as he left it, revealed hidden compartments containing journal entries documenting his experiments at various locations. The final entry, dated 1 week before the retreat, read, "Success at the well today. Momentary transparency achieved with just my voice alone. Confirmed calculation with full choir at precise harmonics. Complete transition should be sustainable." The ancient texts were right. Music isn't just an art, it's a technology for transcendence. As the scientific investigation continued, strange phenomena began occurring around Pine Ridge. Residents reported hearing choral music coming from empty rooms. Several children claimed to have seen people in blue robes walking through walls. Most significantly, hikers and rangers in the mountains near the well site consistently reported acoustic anomalies, echoes that returned with more voices than originated them, songs that seemed to come from inside solid rock formations. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Sarah, following a recurring dream, discovered a hidden storage unit Thomas had rented before his disappearance. Inside was a complete copy of celestial frequencies with extensive notes, diagrams of the well's acoustic properties, and recordings of his solo experiments. Among these materials was a letter addressed to her, dated the day before the retreat. "Dearest Sarah," it read, "if you're reading this, then we've succeeded, though perhaps not returned as I'd hoped. What we're attempting has never been done before, at least not in recorded history, though I believe ancient cultures understood these principles. The harmonics we've discovered don't just create sound, they manipulate the fundamental vibrations that constitute reality itself. The well is a natural amplifier, its dimensions precisely matching the golden ratio in 3 dimensions. With the choir's voices creating the correct harmonic pattern, we should be able to create a stable transition point between dimensional states. I don't know exactly what we'll find on the other side, but the glimpses I've had during my solo experiments suggest a reality where thought, sound, and physical form are more directly connected, where music is the primary language. If we don't return within 3 days, I'll try to leave you a message in the only way possible, encoded in the frequencies that exist in both realities. Listen for us in the spaces between notes, in the resonance of stone and water. We're not leaving, Sarah. We're pioneering. Always your loving brother, Thomas. 30 years and 3 months after the Pine Ridge Harmony Choir disappeared, Sarah Whitfield stood alone at the stone well, now preserved as both a memorial and a scientific research site. She held in her hands the complete score of celestial frequencies, reconstructed from Thomas's notes by Dr. Vasquez and a team of musicologists. Around her neck hung a pendant containing a tuning fork calibrated to the exact resonance frequency identified in Thomas's equations. The morning air was still as Sarah began to sing a single note, middle C, held pure and unwavering. She struck the tuning fork against the stone well and held it to the opening. As the vibrations spread through the well chamber, she continued through the opening measures of her brother's composition, her solitary voice echoing where once 23 had joined in harmony. At precisely 9:15 a.m., the same time the choir had vanished 30 years earlier, something extraordinary happened. As Sarah reached the crucial harmonic passage, her voice was suddenly joined by others, faint at first, then growing stronger. From within the well came the unmistakable sound of the Pine Ridge Harmony Choir, their voices unchanged by time, singing in perfect counterpoint to Sarah's melody. The air around the well opening began to shimmer, becoming translucent, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. And there, in that shimmer, Sarah could see them. 23 figures in blue robes, standing in formation with Thomas at the center, his hands raised in direction. They were singing directly to her, their faces expressing joy and welcome. Thomas lowered his hands and stepped forward, his image growing clearer as he approached what appeared to be an invisible boundary at the well's opening. "The door works both ways, Sarah." His voice came through with perfect clarity, though his lips didn't seem to move in synchronization with the words. "The music exists in both places. It always has. We've been trying to reach you for so long." As the final harmonies of celestial frequencies resonated through the clearing, Thomas extended his hand toward his sister. Sarah, without hesitation, reached toward the shimmering barrier between them, her fingers meeting his. At the exact moment, the composition reached its final, perfect chord. The well looked undisturbed when Sheriff Liu arrived for her scheduled check-in an hour later. The only evidence of Sarah's presence was the sheet music for celestial frequencies, placed carefully beside the stone rim, a single handwritten note attached. "I've gone to join the choir. Listen carefully. We're still singing."